This video is very much going to be a product of its time. Some of what I'm going to say may at some indeterminate point not apply, but much of the content of this video are things that I feel have been true for quite a long time. If you're watching this video in the future, some of this may not be relevant to you and your computer down in that nuclear bunker. If you're a time traveler from the past, some of this may also not apply. Oh yeah, and if you're a time traveler from the past, keep an eye on Wuhan. Okay, so it's no secret that prices for electronics are astronomical. This is due to the shortage in semiconductors. Basically, there aren't enough silicon chips to go around. This is due to a wide variety of coincidental factors that have all combined to create one big shitstorm. The rise in 5G increasing demand, the aforementioned Wuhan incident affecting shipping and production of chips. This effect has most certainly been felt in the price of graphical processing units. This has been exacerbated even further with a huge surge in retail investing, and specifically in cryptocurrency. The ability of GPUs to execute thousands of 32-bit instructions simultaneously makes them enticing to people who want to waste all their energy and money on a meme coin, all because Captain Reddit told them to. This has affected both PC and console gaming. There has been a shortage of consoles, but I'd be lying if I said console gaming was affected to the same degree that PC gaming is. Compare the price of an Xbox to a 3060, the brand new mid-range card. You see, Microsoft and Sony have far more bargaining power than a single consumer. They have the advantage of the economy of scale. In very broad terms, Microsoft goes straight to AMD, saying they're ordering a few million GPUs for their Xboxes. They negotiate a deal to produce a part that never changes. Basically, they have a much lower cost per unit. This is compared to a single consumer buying one card, if they're not a scumbag, from a retailer. This card goes through a much longer supply chain. Basically speaking, the PlayStation and Xbox have a much better price to performance ratio. So is that it? What if I have the money to spend and want the best performance? There are deeper reasons as to why I wouldn't recommend getting into PC gaming. Let me spell out my frustrations with a personal story. I am a PC gamer. I've barely touched a console since, well, I had to dust off my ancient Xbox One for the Halo Infinite beta, but before that, it had been a few years easily. I wanted to hold out on upgrading my PC. Naturally, you want the best value out of the things you buy. I was formerly on a GTX 780, a high-end card. In 2013. I was hoping it would carry me through this current situation, but it seems it just fell outside the cutoff point. Looking at Halo Infinite's requirements, it became clear I'd been caught out. I waited too long on upgrading a card that was just too old for new games. And there's already a point. It didn't gradually phase out like you'd expect, you know, slowly changing from high to medium to low on newer games over time. No, they just kind of dropped support. The architecture was just not worth developing for. Devs decided it's not worth optimizing for those old cards. This is to be expected. Old tech gets phased out, but it hits at the heart of this idea of buying the best cards for the sake of future-proofing. Your card generation is eventually dropped due to not being worth developing for, just like a console generation. The difference is console games tend to look better further into the generation as developers master the hardware and get better at optimizing. Compare early to late 7th gen games. It's night and day. On PC, game devs have to split their priorities between a bunch of different hardware, and they typically worry the most about the most recent hardware. It'd be impossible for them to optimize their games for every single card and every single CPU. Basically speaking, you're rarely getting the most you can get out of your GPU on a PC. So, I took the L. My hand was forced. I decided to switch sides. AMD GPUs are cheaper, if cheap is even a term you could use to describe the current market. And you know what? Nvidia's done some bad, anti-competitive things in the past. I want to root for the underdog. I can tell you, as it stands, they absolutely deserve their spot. I got a 6600 XT, because that's all I could find for a dirt cheap 700 Aussie bucks. Price to performance is god awful, but that's kind of the standard right now. Did it work? Well, their drivers suck. And here's the thing, you know console wars? Well, PC gamers are certainly not above that shit. If you tell an AMD drone that you have an issue, it's always because of your motherboard, or your RAM, or your power supply, or your CPU, that's if it isn't an AMD CPU, or it's due to the alignment of the stars. Like, why is there no AMD control panel where I can disable all the features that mess with my PC even being able to turn on? And why the hell does Windows Update screw up AMD drivers? Sure, okay, it's Microsoft's fault, but is there nobody at AMD that can call up old Bill in between sessions of spying on people and installing nanobots in their head and tell him to stop overriding AMD drivers with their own garbage? I won't lie, switching to AMD has been a pain. How is this acceptable for the second biggest GPU brand on the biggest operating system? Not to mention, strange issues in games like Destiny 2. Apparently, whenever I update drivers now, I need to take a road trip to every location in the game to compile shaders. The first hour of gameplay is always unbearably laggy with incredibly high CPU usage. And this isn't just a me issue. Others had this issue too, and apparently it's just a thing that happens, that people deal with. Like, what? Here's the thing. PC gaming is often sold as some wide world of modularity where the consumer is king and there's a vast array of choice. That just isn't true. For GPUs, there's two choices, with one firmly in the lead. This isn't the 90s where we could pick from Nvidia, 3DFX, ATI. ATI was bought out by AMD, which makes things worse, considering AMD is one of the only two feasible choices for consumer CPUs. And apparently Radeon used to actually be competitive back then. The processor market needs more competition, but the barrier for entry is just immense. The monopolies just continue to consolidate power and are basically in a position to raw dog us without consequences. And that's the thing. The switch to PC isn't some jump to freedom. PC gaming isn't some haven of consumer choice. You're probably going to use Windows. If you truly want freedom over ease of use, you should go for Linux, right? But considering this is a gaming video, you probably also want to play games. If you want ease of use, console gaming is probably the best course of action. And here's the thing, like Linux, PC gaming in general certainly serves its purpose. There's a place for it. If you're truly going to make the most of Linux, you probably already know that you're going to use it. And you probably already know what you're going to use it for. You may be a malware analyst or a server admin. You've decided on it, and a YouTube video isn't going to convince you otherwise. Here's the thing, if you're on the fence, then it'd probably just be the best advice not to use it, to stay with what is the easiest to use, what is familiar. The same applies for PC gaming as a whole. I'm not sure if you guys know, but I do YouTube. Thus, I'd get utility out of PC gaming. I need a powerful PC anyway for video editing. It just makes sense. Hence, I'll have to stick with PC gaming. If you're on the fence, I'd probably not recommend getting into PC gaming. It's a commitment. If you are the person to truly benefit from PC gaming, chances are you're probably already a PC gamer. All the evangelizing for the benefits of PC gaming is kind of pointless. And that's the other thing I want to cover, the evangelism. I mentioned those PC gaming console warriors earlier, who try to sell a platform like it's their own product. I want to tackle some of the common conceptions promoted by the PC master race that extend beyond the current situation. Console gaming has almost always been cheaper, even accounting for the price of games and online play. There has for a long time been this pervasive trend of budget console killer PCs. Countless YouTube videos that promise you could get a gaming PC for slightly less or slightly more than the price of the newest console that beats the consoles in terms of performance. This is almost always bullshit. Compare the utility you'd get out of a mid-range PC from 2013 to the Xbox One or the PS4. You'd be using Haswell i5 4000 series. For GPUs, a 780 was high-end back then. If you want a mid-range, you'd be looking at maybe a GTX 660 or 760. Now look at some of the best looking games of the last console gen. You wouldn't stand a chance of running them on that hardware. I'd know, because I actually had all that hardware. You look at all these guides online for cheap console killer PCs, and they almost always suck. They often omit the cost of peripherals, or they talk about how they tracked a part down from some hidden grey market seller in a dark trench coat, or they got it from a friend, or worst of all, they had it lying around from a previous build. These budget PC builds are meant to ease you into PC gaming. They're meant for people who are new and not going to have parts lying around. These budget PC builds, I feel, ultimately misrepresent the reality of the PC gaming experience, and I think set new PC players up for failure. Of course, I feel this perception has changed. More people are starting to realize that these kind of budget console killer PCs are kind of BS, especially in the current market. And that's not to mention how it often conflicts with the other selling points for PC, like the high resolution and frame rates. You can't claim PC is better for allowing you to push higher resolutions and then also claim that it's cheaper. A good gaming PC is going to be expensive. You shouldn't lie about that to make PC gaming seem more inclusive. Okay, yes, playing in 144Hz is actually mind-blowing. It is absolutely worth the hype. But it's expensive if you want to do it in modern games. If somebody's going for a cheap build, it's just not worth trying. Not to mention the other benefit of PC gaming, mods. Again, on a cheap build, you're probably not going to be able to run most of the reshade or 4K retexture mods, or 8K giant titty hentai mods. If devs suck at optimizing, you can't expect lightning fast performance on user-generated content. What about the anti-consumer behavior of console companies? Remember that Xbox One launch? The shit they tried to pull there? Where they tried to force everybody into always online? Yeah, being controlled by a single corporation who pull anti-consumer stunts like this on platforms they own, using entirely proprietary software, surely that's bad. If you think a good old Microsoft butt-fucking is exclusive to console gamers, then you're sorely mistaken. Microsoft would force you into a smart contract Internet of Things cock cage if they could. And the other stewards of PC gaming aren't exactly without blemish either. Valve has this good guy reputation. That reputation is entirely unearned. They are the most responsible for the domination of online DRM. Who was the trailblazer for loot boxes? Remember when they tried to push paid mods? Valve is more responsible for killing the classic golden age of PC gaming than any other company. Certainly more so than any console company. I will stand by that statement to the very end. And what about their competition? Epic? Need I say more about them snatching exclusives to force fans to use an inferior storefront? The only truly free storefronts are sites like GOG, where you can buy DRM-free games, who are and will remain perpetually niche. If you want to be truly free, you're not going to be, so long as you use a locked down platform like Windows. It may as well be an Xbox in terms of the freedom you have. And if you want true freedom over your experience, you should probably just go over to Linux. And as I established, I have 4 letters for Linux gaming: L, M, A, and O. How about the superior PC gaming community? Not going to lie, I always found it funny how PC master race types would always tout the superior and more mature PC gaming community, while simultaneously being the most obnoxious people imaginable. Better community is never really a good argument. I've found virtually every online community at a certain level, once it becomes large enough, is basically the same thing. There will always be helpful people, there will always be pricks, there will always be trolls. I don't think this argument holds much water. Now, I want to get to the worst point of all. Consoles are holding games back. I don't think I've ever heard an actual developer say this. First of all, devices built specifically for gaming have been around as long as gaming. It wasn't really until the early 90s that PC gaming was even viable, or at least viable on the same level as consoles. Of course, there's always been PC games, but they never had the same level of action that you could achieve on, say, a Nintendo. What gaming consoles do is bring gaming as a whole to a wider audience. Console gaming does not detract from or harm PC gaming. Perhaps this is a perception arising from the existence of poor PC ports in the past. The idea that devs are leaving PC behind and neglecting it to chase those console bucks and giving PC gamers the scraps. That's by and large not true. Devs that release bad console ports are often devs that develop, well, primarily for console. Here's the thing, it's not like if there were no consoles, they'd focus exclusively on PC and make better optimized games. If there were no consoles, these developers and the games they make wouldn't exist at all. The options are either bad port or no port at all. This is seemingly becoming less common nowadays anyway. It's far less often that I hear about games that just have a diagram of Xbox controls in the pause menu and nothing else, where you can't even change the resolution. Part of me also feels this criticism comes from people who feel that games had to be dumbed down for console players. And I've certainly had some feelings on that in the past, at least as it pertains to FPS. The one area I feel has kind of fallen is real-time strategy games, but that's not even the fault of consoles. The biggest culprits in the decline of the real-time strategy are MOBAs like League of Legends, which are basically just RTS, with no soul, with all the fun stripped out, and designed only to make you angry and frustrated. So after all this is said, will I continue PC gaming? Well, yes, I will. If you're making videos or 3D modeling or making mods, or you just want to play in 4K 240 FPS and don't mind spending the money, or you're a programmer or any number of productive tasks, then PC gaming is for you. And you probably already know that it's for you, and you don't need me to tell you. If you're on the fence, I'd probably say no, certainly for now. You know, I've actually found in my life occasionally middle-aged people who were once upon a time PC gamers often go back to playing on console as they get older. It does tend to become a hassle with upkeep, like a less expensive version of keeping a car. While it's satisfying to build your first PC when you're young, it just starts to get tedious as you get older. Having to research what parts are best starts to seem like a waste of time for time-starved adults just to partake in a recreational activity. I also have to acknowledge that I made a video on this topic like 4 years ago, and it was cringeworthy, but my thesis was that PC Master Race was an old meme that had run its course. It had become a cringeworthy dead meme. This was in 2017. If it wasn't true then, it has to be true now. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and goodbye. I have 4 letters for Linux gaming: L, M, A, and O. That's so bad. Fuck.